Okay, this has been a topic that has been really low-key. Low key. Ha ha. Just like the Nicki song. Let's talk a little bit about Chris Tanev and what exactly the future holds for him as a Vancouver Canuck. Now, it's the age-old idea. Chris Tanev, trade rumors, potential destinations, whether or not he's going to remain a Vancouver Canuck or not. These have been the ideas that have been thrown around for years. But it's a little bit different now. Because the Vancouver Canucks are no longer sellers. The Vancouver Canucks are no longer bad. The Vancouver Canucks are no longer in a position where people feel the necessary need to trade Tanev. Even just a year ago, we were talking, like, a whole bunch about trading Alex Edler because he was expiring and then he eventually re-signed and now he's here again today. Just out of due diligence, just out of necessity, let's bring up Chris Tanev and how good he has been, how good he could be down the line, and how exactly things are gonna play out, because right now Chris Tanev is at the end of a 4.45 average annual value cap hit on a 5-year contract with a modified no-trade clause. Now, in order to get this discussion going, I wanted to bring up a tweet that I saw yesterday that has gotten Canucks fans really pushed onto either side of the fence, let's just say. This is a tweet from our boy Judd Brackett is Underrated, whose username I absolutely agree with. He has this to say. Look, I love Chris Tanev. The guy has been a warrior for this team for a decade. But the D-man market is set. If a 37-year-old Andy Green gets a second, you could probably get a late first for Tanev. No way we can keep both him and Stetcher going forward. Make your move, Jim. Now, if we remember all the way back in August, back when I was in Japan and I was making these videos of me in front of arcades and walking down Osaka and all these different streets, Donburi and all that stuff, we talked about how Jim Benning has spoken about how he legitimately wants to get a first-round pick back, and how he does indeed want to put this team in a position to draft within the top 31 by the time the 2020 draft rolls around. So, this is an interesting idea. Is Chris Tanev the piece that gets that done? Because Benning has been on a really weird stretch of comments when it comes to talking about trades. 1 minute we're talking about how, yeah, I would love to trade to get a first round pick. And the next we're talking about, yeah, I would love to trade to get a top 6 forward. And those kind of mix together not so well, those two different ideas over there. Because I think if you're taking a look at where the Vancouver Canucks are right now, there isn't really a realistic way that can go out there and get all of these assets, get some firsts, and get some players, because those require some very different philosophies and very different teams to bite in order to get that done. But let's talk about Tanev in this light, because Judd Brackett is Underrated does bring up a pretty good point. We talked about this in the Canadiens video yesterday. Excuse me, not yesterday, like 3 hours ago. We talked about this in the Canadiens video, that an Andy Green was able to get a second-round pick. So what the heck is a Jeff Petrie going to get? And in the same vein, for the context of the Canucks, what the heck is a Chris Tanev going to be able to get? Now, am I the one who says that we should absolutely trade Tanev? No, not necessarily. If we keep Tanev, we keep him around just like we did with Edler, have him re-sign and eventually play the future with the Canucks. However long his next contract is, I'd be okay with that. But this discussion does need to be had, because this discussion does indeed have some significance. There are some interesting replies here talking about how we shouldn't trade Tanev because Tanev has really helped Hughes develop his NHL game. But a lot of the replies are saying that it's actually the other way around, and that Tanev is only looking good because of Hughes. And people are talking about how the Canucks aren't really in a position to trade their players on the team today anymore because they have a good team that can make the playoffs. So are we in that position where we're finished with trading away the guys on our team to help build in the draft for the future years? And that's kind of an interesting idea that I was thinking about as well, because I'll tell you this, I was thinking a lot about the Podkolzin pick that we made a year ago, and I was thinking about the impact that he's going to be able to make at the NHL level. That impact is within the next 3 or 4 years, because Podkolzin had 2 more years left on his KHL deal. He wasn't allowed to come to the NHL immediately after, and that to me was kind of an interesting thing where I was like, yeah, you know, like he's gonna come here and he's gonna be good a few years down the line, no biggie, right? And that's kind of the idea that we're going to have to expect if the Vancouver Canucks go out there and they make some trades to get some prospects or some picks. Unless those prospects have already had some good development time in either the minors or in pro leagues elsewhere in the world, a first-round pick that the Canucks get for Chris Tanev, which would probably be, I don't know, a rental-like pick, so it would probably be in the 17 to 23 or 4 or 5 range, right? That guy that the Vancouver Canucks get in the 20s or the 25s or in the 18s, that guy's probably going to take a much longer time to develop and actually step into the league than any of our top guys. And our top guys have been Podkolzin, who had a minimum of 2 years left before he could step foot into NHL ice. Pettersson and Hughes each took an extra year before coming over into the NHL and becoming stars. And believe me, not everybody can do that, come over to the NHL and immediately become a star. Hughes and Pettersson are the outliers, they are not the rule. So I don't think it is honestly super rational to take a look at it and say, yeah, I'd rather have a prospect in the 20s than Chris Tanev now, and Chris Tanev potentially for the next 2 or 3 years. Now, do I want to discount the idea that I proposed in my video earlier today and say, hey, maybe Chris Tanev gets traded to another team. The Canucks don't do too well in the playoffs, but then Chris Tanev goes to free agency and he comes to Vancouver back again, and they keep the asset that they got for Tanev, a first-round pick or whatever. That obviously would be really cool, but at the same time, do you value one first-round pick so much that you would be willing to sacrifice 1 year's worth of playoff development and playoff run for this young core? That's a philosophical argument that I'm not gonna fault anybody for thinking one way or the other, but it is to my belief that Chris Tanev can indeed get these assets now. It's always been kind of a meme, right? Tanev going to Toronto for a first, and all the Leafs fans would get really mad. But the market has been set to be placed in a position where that does seem viable. Not specifically Tanev to the Leafs, but Tanev for a first in general. Obviously, though, Tanev has been playing really well with Hughes, and I remember even when I was on the Canucks Conversation podcast with Chris Faber a year ago, I said that Hughes and Tanev would be like the main ultimate pairing. Hughes the ultimate offensive guy, Tanev the ultimate defensive guy, and we've been seeing that this season that it does indeed work. But some people are also bringing up the idea that, hey, if you trade away a Tanev, you only have a Myers and a Stetcher on the right side. You can call up some of these other players to help you out. Brogan Rafferty is doing really, really well in the AHL with the Utica Comets. Jordy Ben is a guy who can play the right side as well. So there are some counter-arguments to the positional need that the Vancouver Canucks would need to address if they trade Tanev. But obviously, I don't want to go out on a limb and say that Rafferty is a guaranteed better player than Tanev is today. Tanev is obviously the best right-handed player the Canucks have in their organization, but the contract situation does put people in a position to say, hey, why not take a look at trading him? And who knows, maybe if Chris Tanev doesn't even want to become a Canuck next year, maybe trading him would be the right idea. I never want to see players walk in free agency for nothing. We did that with Verbata, it sucked. We did that with Hamus, that sucked too, and we all know how the fan base reacted after that. So if we're in a position to do the same thing with Tanev and we allow that to happen, boy, that's like the worst case scenario here, man. We decide to keep Tanev, we forfeit the idea of getting future assets for him, and he doesn't plan to re-sign. Obviously, I'm not going to say that he's not going to come back. I think he probably would re-sign a contract with Vancouver in the same way Alex Edler did, but obviously that's a lot to think about. So comment down below whatever you think about Chris Tanev. He's been good, yes, but this discussion does need to be entertained on whether or not he should be traded or in consideration for being traded, just because the market has been set and the price for a Tanev does seem pretty high amongst other NHL teams. Hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.